ng social media ngayon para mas mabilis at malawak na pakikipag-usap at pagpapakalat ng impormasyon. Ginagamit na rin ang social media ng GMA News at ng ibang news organizations sa ibang mundo. Kaugnay niyan, makakapanayam natin ang co-founder ng Public Insight Network na nakabase sa Minnesota, USA, si Mr. Andrew Haig. Magandang umaga. Good morning, Mr. Haig.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, so when did you get in? I mean, you just got into the Philippines?
Yesterday, after an epic journey from Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll make this as painless as possible.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, so what's your purpose in coming to the country?
Well, I'm with the State Department on a speaker series to talk to journalists around the country about citizen journalism and engaging citizens and producing journalism.
So you're a professional journalist. I know that you went
Yes.
to the Columbia School of Journalism.
True.
And now you're developing tools for journalists or for ordinary people who want to contribute to journalism. What's your mission now?
It's both. It's to find new ways to use network technologies to connect sources to journalists, so that sources can help journalists do their jobs better and to shape news coverage.
When you say sources, are you just talking about experts in their fields, or for example, there's a tornado or a natural disaster somewhere? Would your sources be people who witnessed it and or were victimized? Would they be included in this network?
That's a piece of it. And actually, during the tsunami and the earthquake recently, we had eyewitnesses on the ground who are part of our network who shared their insights with National Public Radio and some other affiliates. So there's that. But by and large, anyone can be a source. And we believe that everyone has expertise and knowledge to share on any given topic. And the power of the platform we developed is that all that information gets stored in a database and it's searchable, so we can go and target questions to people based on what we know about them. So we can ask them questions that are very specific to their background and to their experience.
Okay, so how would, let's say, journalists use this tool? Can they ask you to do a shout out, for example? I mean, like Filipino journalists, for example, they're wondering how the new Saudi labor policy will affect Filipino workers in the Middle East. Could they do this through your network?
Absolutely. The way it tends to work is that we create what we call a query. Basically, it's an online survey. And once that query has been created, that link can be spread anywhere through any network. So then you could work with individuals in different countries or trusted organizations, and they can send that link to that query out to their groups. And then you can gather information from a kind of a widespread and dispersed group of people about any topic that you want. And then all that information comes back into the database. It's also sent immediately to the journalists working on the story. So before they've even picked up the phone, they may have 30 or 40 stories from people who are who have direct experience with the topic that they want to cover.
So why is this important now for the way journalism is practiced today?
Well, I think for so long the practice of journalism was based on a notion of scarcity, that there aren't many sources, and that the sources we do tend to work with come from a very narrow group of people who are usually trained to deal with the media, and that the public service that they provide isn't as great as if we were able to reach out to people who really understand what's going on, who experience it every day, who live the issue. And we think that a fundamental rethinking of how we do sourcing can change journalism for the better.
Okay, so are you online right now?
I am.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm seeing your website, Public Insight Network.
Yes.
Okay, and then can you just give us an example of let's say a recent story that you were able to produce using this a network of citizens providing information?
Sure. So here's a story Minnesota Public Radio covered on the debt ceiling debate, and a woman named Krista helped Minnesota Public Radio News put a voice to concerns that unemployed people have about whether or not they'd be vulnerable because of recently passed. That the recently passed bill did not include an extension.
So this
of
is the
unemployment
United States
right.
debt ceiling. Okay.
Right. So that's one story. Every day there's 2 or 3 stories and sometimes more that are being informed by folks in the network.
So in other words, there's this major decision done in Washington, D.C.,
right.
and you're trying to find out how this affects local communities, local people. Media organizations can't have correspondents or journalists everywhere. So
right.
this is one way of overcoming that
right.
barrier.
And we're often not aware of what changes might be happening on the ground. So whereas we might think there's a certain story out there, by reaching out to people in an open way and giving them space to share their experience, we find we're very often surprised. And the angle that we came into the story with changes remarkably by the time we learn from all these people.
Mm-hmm. So can we click on one of these and
Sure,
see
yeah.
and see what people are saying actually? So
Well, what you'll see when you click on it is a standard news story. In fact,
Okay.
if you're looking at the news story online, it's often hard to tell what that,
Oh, I see.
that
Okay.
the source network informed it.
Okay. So the news story is based on a database which
Right.
gathered this it's kind of raw information,
Right,
right?
right. Raw stories and raw, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess one of my questions is, and I'm sure a lot of people are also thinking about this. How do you make sure that what people are telling you is true?
Yeah.
Could they be making stuff up? I mean, do you call these people up and ask them if their identity is true, or
Yeah.
how do you vet this stuff?
Well, absolutely. I mean, again, the power of this platform is that it's all funneling into professional journalism. So professional journalists are always handling the material and are always making sense of it. So very little of what we receive from the public goes onto our website without having gone through journalistic inquiry and journalistic sourcing. And the journalist will call the source up and say, "Are you, who you say you are?" And then over time, as sources become more credible, that's noted in the system, so that when future journalists reach back out to that source, they know this person's been a credible source. So the network's constantly improving and being kind of vetted over time.
And that also means that the unreliable sources are banned or they're marked as such?
Marked as such.
Not publicly, though.
Not publicly, but
just for the journalists.
Right. So if I were a journalist and I were searching for a certain kind of source in the network who is misrepresenting themselves, there would be a note there saying, this person may not be who they say they are, but that doesn't mean they might not have something valuable to share about something else. So we don't ban them entirely, and in fact, we take a very broad view of expertise and who's in the network.
So, is this the future of journalism, where everybody can kind of even have a pretension of being a journalist, where they're filing information and kind of reporting what they see as witnesses? Because there are many places where things are happening where there are no professional journalists, but there are always, witnesses. So is this the future?
Well, I believe so. I mean, from the source's standpoint, they don't feel like they're acting like a journalist, and I think most people, probably the vast majority of people, don't want to be journalists necessarily. But they do want to contribute to journalism that helps improve the public conversation.
So you're not calling them citizen journalists?
No,
because
absolutely
there's that term that's,
sometimes in the case of the tsunami, we had a woman who, in fact, was a journalist and had toured one of the areas that was devastated by the tsunami, and she was doing essentially citizen journalism. She was a professional journalist, but she was acting as a guide to that scene. So they're not necessarily citizen journalists. What they do is they get a survey, they respond to it. It may take them 3 minutes, and that doesn't feel like a great investment of time, but to us it's extremely important, especially if we can get 30 or 40 stories like that and say what's really going on here based on everything that we're hearing from our sources.
Okay, what would you suggest to journalists in the Philippines? How should they be using tools like this?
Well, I think the number one thing is you'll be amazed by what people will share if you just care to ask. And that on any given story that we're working on, there's someone out there who knows more than we do. And if you take that attitude into your work, you're always going to be looking around corners and looking under rocks for people who have the kind of expertise who are going to really illuminate the story. And I think that is a mindset that will help journalists, whatever they're doing. Now, this is a system that has a lot of technical work that's been put into it. And it's very kind of robust and sophisticated, and I don't expect everyone to be able to build one of these. We are increasing our international partnerships, so we hope to find more trusted partners around the world.
Well, right in the Philippines, like right now, journalists are using Facebook and Twitter to gather information. What do you think of those social media platforms? Are they useful for this kind of news gathering?
I think they're incredibly powerful. I also think. And we very often use Twitter once we create a query, we'll spread it through Twitter or Facebook. But a couple things, I think it's hard to manage that information that you're gathering on Twitter. You may gather a lot of information from sources, but it tends to be one-off kind of stuff. You're not going to enter into a long-term relationship with that source on Twitter.
So the great advantage of your system is that it organizes a lot of this crowdsource information so that you can use it again, or you can actually tap the same people again.
Right.
Whereas Facebook, once it disappears from your wall, it's hard to track these people.
Right, exactly. Okay. And I think there's also a question of privacy too. We give all sources source protection, and in America that allows us to protect their information. If the government were to say, we want to subpoena your notebooks for your story, well, folks in the network have source protection. I don't think that's the case with Facebook or Twitter.
Okay, you're going to be around the Philippines the next several days, just in Manila, or are you going?
Going to Davao City and Cebu City.
Cebu, Davao, just to give this kind of briefing or talking
exactly.
about crowdsourced information, social media?
Yeah, hopefully I'll be doing a lot less lecturing and a lot more learning from what's going on. So it seems like a very vibrant kind of atmosphere for citizen journalism.
And we can speak English too, so
yes,
it's easy to
helps.
communicate. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Andrew Haig of Public Insight Network.